Hello, everyone, and welcome to the follow-up.
Howdy.
Hope you're doing well.
Hi, Katie.
Hello, how are you?
I am just wonderful.
Really?
How are you today?
Why, look at your cup. It says Manure Happens.
Manure happens, yes.
It sure does.
Yeah. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
Well, today we wanted to talk about if you're one of these brides and grooms or one of these couples that have your heart set on a live wedding band for your wedding, we have some things you might want to take into consideration in terms of your venue.
Yeah, I think this is a really good topic, Katie, because, if this is your first wedding,
Yeah.
Now if you've been down, if this isn't your first rodeo, that's a different story. But this is your first wedding. There are some things that probably just never even cross your mind. You have this idyllic picture of what your wedding day would be like and the venue and all that sort of stuff. And the reality can be completely different.
Yeah, it can. I don't know where you are in the planning stages of what you've got going on. I would say 90% of the couples that hire us already have a venue.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually the number one thing that everyone shop for first. They look for a venue. It makes sense. It makes sense to go in that order. However, if you have your heart set, if you're a music lover and you know that you want a live band at your wedding, you might want to look at the venues and make sure they are appropriate for what your wishes are in terms of music. I will say most of the wedding venues we play are not conducive to live music.
I would have to concur.
And I venture to say most of the wedding venues that we've played were not originally built to be a wedding venue.
And therein lies the problem, I think. It's a conversion process.
I think so. This past weekend, we did a wedding in an industrial space. Baltimore's really big for industrial spaces. Mm-hmm. Looks kind of like this. But this particular venue, of course, I'm not going to name any names, but it's a wood shop during the week, during the day. There's a big old wood shop in the back. And then in the front, it is very, very industrial with glass and steel and concrete. And that's pretty much, that was it. And, it's a hard room. That's a kind of a hard room to control the sound in. The sound just bounces around all over the place. And the couple that hired us, that was a major concern for them. They had their heart set on a live band, but they booked the venue first.
Yeah. Well, it's. I think that when people are looking at venues, they're looking at two primary things. They're looking at first, like the location, like what's the visible location.
Uh-huh.
We want to have a beach wedding, or we want to have
yes.
So that sort of thing. So it's like, where is the venue located? Then the second thing maybe the second thing they look at is the capacity. Like, if you're planning on having a 300 guest wedding, well, you've got to have a venue that's going to be able to house that many people. And somewhere in that list, sometimes it's one, sometimes it's two, sometimes three, is, of course, cost. So,
cost. Well, I also think, especially for the females, maybe, I don't know if it applies as much to the males, but the aesthetic of the room.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of, for me, that kind of relates to like the location.
Location, okay.
It's kind of like, so the aesthetics, it's like, where's it located? What's the view like?
What's the vibe? What's the feel?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and some of the venues with the best vibes are the worst for sound.
Worst.
Yeah. Here in Lancaster has a lot of barn weddings, lots of barn venues.
Yeah.
Barns that have been converted into an event space. Typically there's, an upstairs reception area, and then there's a downstairs area where they usually have cocktail hour. The barn venues aren't that bad. in
Actually,
terms
one of my favorite ones
yeah,
is the one out towards E-Town.
yeah, Star Barn.
Star Barn. I love playing that.
Yeah, it's big. It's huge. It's
Huge.
probably one of the biggest
It's
barn.
bigly.
It's the biggest barn wedding. I'm fairly certain in Central Pennsylvania region. But the sound, I mean, it's just all wood, so
Yeah.
we don't typically have any issues in there. Some of the smaller barns that they've converted are a little small when it comes to trying to fit a band in there, so that can be challenging. Ooh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Outdoor venues,
Ooh, outdoor venues. Yeah.
tent weddings.
Ooh. I think we talked about, like, in our first episode, we talked about the
Muddy,
the Mud Fest.
Mudfest,
Yeah, yeah.
2023.
Mud Bowl. Yeah.
There are a lot of other scenarios that we've been in regards to tent weddings. One of the big ones in the summer is just the heat being so darn hot, not having fans. Some of the fancier tents you can get, well, you can pay extra money for an air conditioning system, and something you definitely might want to consider if you're in the thick of summer, because once you're dressed up in your suits,
Yeah. There are a lot of little logistical issues that people just don't take into consideration. And it's no fault of anyone. It's just lack of experience. Like so if you've never, like I said, if you never had a wedding before, you just don't know what you're going to be dealing with. But, when you start thinking about things like, okay, I want to do an outdoor wedding, fantastic. One, you're at the mercy of the weather. You just don't know. And, weddings can become very, very, very expensive.
yes.
And as you're starting to go through the process, I know when my wife and I got married, and we decided just to do a small backyard wedding, because we just did not have the money to invest in a big thing, and we just wanted to keep it small and simple, because you get into the whole, if I invite this person, I got to invite that person, and
Right.
that whole thing. We just wanted to keep it small and simple. But because we were doing it outdoors, we had to think about contingency plans. It's like, okay, well, if it's raining, where are we going to do this? And, I think a lot of times people, you hope for the best, but when you start getting into the final stages of preparation, maybe you're thinking, oh, I want to have this wonderful outdoor wedding by the beach, and then we're going to have a big band, then we're going to have this wonderful catering, and blah, 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 blah. And then you start looking at the numbers, and you're going, whoa, we got to cut something somewhere. And because, like the venues, especially like the outdoor ones, it's like, okay, yeah, we can do this, but, the tent's going to cost you this much. And then if you want to have the AC, it's going to cost you this much.
But it's almost like you don't, those are the nitty gritty pieces that you don't usually get to until like the last couple of weeks, when you're like, oh my gosh, totally slipped my mind.
Yeah.
Or it's been so darn hot. We can't have this on our wedding day. We've got to invest in those AC units, or even one of the big things, I think, especially for beach weddings or being outside, is the wind.
Yeah.
The wind at the beach. You think it's you in your brain, you're like, oh, it's just going to be a lovely, lovely thing, and the next thing you know, your hair's all over the place. You didn't get a good picture.
The hurricane's coming.
Hurricanes coming. God forbid it rains on all your guests at the beach. Or it could be, actually, my neighbor, she just celebrated her 5-year anniversary, but I know she got married on the beach, I believe in September. It was cold, and her guests were just freezing. I wasn't there. Sorry, Leah, I wasn't there because I was performing a wedding with the band.
Yes, I was working.
We were working, which is, that happens. But yeah, outdoors always kind of funny, because you are really at the mercy of what it decides to do that day. And sometimes the contingency plans are very challenging to pull off.
Yeah. Oh, they are. Yeah. And I'm gonna put my grumpy pants on for a minute.
All right.
Here's my least favorite thing about outdoor weddings.
Yes.
I learned, after being in this band for a few gigs, I learned the importance of carrying a fan with me. So I keep a fan behind me.
Yeah.
So that's that helps me out. But the thing that it does not help with, the freaking gnats.
Oh yeah.
Gnats, bugs. When you're in there and it's a little sweltering,
Yeah.
and there are gnats and fruit flies and bees and
Oh.
you
Oh
name it.
yeah. We've had actually, of course, can't name names. Just can't do it. We've had hornets. We've had wasps. All the things, and we're just always constantly, we're always dealing with elemental issues, and it doesn't matter how hard we try.
Out of your control.
Out of our control. Totally out of our control.
Nothing you can do about
What
it.
about, have you ever played a venue that was like super non-traditional?
Super non-traditional.
Like, not a hotel, not a...
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Well, I'm trying. I can't say it without saying the name of the place.
Got it.
But yeah, it basically, yeah, like
If it's good, we can say the name.
Yeah. It's like, we've played in Baltimore and in Philly. We've done a lot of gigs that are in non-traditional places, like well, I wasn't on the ones at the
Baltimore Baltimore Museum of Industry.
Yeah.
BMI.
Yeah.
We've been there quite a few times. Very, very unique. It goes through the industry over the past 100+ years, and they actually have some of the equipment in there. They've got these old signs, neon signs. It's super cool. Old cars, all throughout the space. And typically people will have cocktail hour in the museum, and so you're moseying around, checking out these very cool exhibits. That is actually, yes, that is one of it didn't come to mind until you brought it up, but that's one of my favorite non-traditional venues.
Yeah. Nothing against the venue. It's a little, to me, kind of a weird one, and it's just because something in my head is the Franklin Institute.
Yes.
Because I remember the first time we played there, and there's this, we're playing in this huge room, and right behind us is this huge statue of Ben Franklin, and I kept looking up. And I think I'm looking up his robe.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just, but I mean, it was really cool.
Very cool.
But and the same thing we did recently, a wedding at the American Swedish History Museum, American Swedish Museum, whatever. It was a really cool venue. I mean, we played outdoors on the patio, under a tent, which was cool. But like inside, it was really nice because that's where they had the cocktail hour and stuff. Yes. Like people were out on the patio eating, drinking. But then you could also go in, and like a lot of the food stations were set up inside, and I was just wandering around, just kind of looking at all the cool stuff there, and that makes it more interesting to me than just being in a sterile.
Yes, I will say though, most of those spaces have very strict load-in policies and load-out policies because they're a public museum during the day. So a lot of times you cannot. A lot of times you get a very, very short amount of time to set up because they'll close at 5:00 and you have a wedding ceremony. It starts at 6. So it's kind of crazy. So something to definitely take into consideration if you are going to have a live band, because it can be challenging to make things happen in a certain amount of time.
Yeah. Well, the band, the vendors,
any vendors.
It's the logistics of getting your gear in can be really challenging at times. The whether they're steps or elevator or and those are some of my least favorite.
Downtown Philly.
I remember one of the gigs we did in Philly where they had we were playing like on the upper level of a building in Center City, and you had to go down a one-way street into, like, everything in Philly is a one-way street apparently, into
An
a little
alley?
alley.
With they had a big dumpster.
Yeah, with you go through the dumpsters, and then there was the one point of egress.
Yeah.
You had to go through this little door into this freight elevator.
That had was this the, I think
Yeah,
I was just gonna
yeah.
bring this one up.
Yeah.
Has there's a crank on it that takes it's an old vintage elevator. And you're supposed to have someone operate it for you.
Authorized personnel only. Who authorized you?
It's true. Well, I couldn't find anyone. You get a bottleneck of vendors trying to load in at the same time using the same darn elevator, and it's a hand crank. And if you can't find somebody, well, what are you gonna do? So anyway, I took it upon myself to operate the elevator on my own, and I got lost. I got it stuck in the basement, and I couldn't figure out how to get out or get it back upstairs.
Yeah. So I mean, it's little things like that, and then it's. I think with most things, we sometimes lose sight of those little small details that can have a tremendous amount of impact. So it's like with stuff like that, it's like, okay, well, we've got one elevator. It's not like we could hump the gear up and down the steps
Right.
because you're 10 stories up. But it's like, okay, well, you're going to take this one elevator. Everybody's trying to get out at the same time. And by the way, you got an hour to.
And you got an hour to load out or an hour to load in.
Yeah.
I know. Imagine how difficult it is expressing to you guys or trying to put it in writing to you guys. This is the load-in process, and this is how it needs to happen. Some of these places, it's just so hard to relay that message because sometimes I don't have all the answers, and sometimes I know it's going to be a shit show. Load-in. I always feel blessed when we have an easy load-in where it's easy to park. We don't have to lug anything or take a trolley or, one of my favorite venues to play. Well, it's not really my favorite venue to play. I just like it there because they have awesome food. Odette's. Odette's in, where is it? Anyway, north of Philly. North of Philly.
North of Philly.
Right on the river.
Yeah.
The Odette's. Anyway, oh my gosh. Amazing food. Amazing drinks. Rather small reception area, but very difficult to load in. And they make you park half a mile down the road and then take a trolley back. So it makes things really challenging. Not a lot of storage space, but we've done quite a few weddings there. Some with a full band. I've done some with smaller bands, but some are challenging.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it certainly goes beyond our needs as entertainment, as a vendor. Some of these places, even it's difficult for the guest.
Yes.
Where they don't have. Where the parking is so far away from the entrance to the building, and people are, again, we are talking about like weather and stuff. Yeah, if it's a rainy day or exceptionally hot or a cold day, and you've got to park, in BFE or those sort of things, it becomes a little egregious, honestly, for the everyone, and sometimes the venues can be accommodating. They'll do the best they can, and then others are just like, you paid for it, suck it up.
Well, I've had really pretty nightmarish situation this year and last year with the same company who runs venues. I'm not going to say where, and I'm not going to say who. But what they have done with our clients is they've happily taken their money for a venue that has not been finished yet. And when 2 months out, they're going, oh, sorry, the venue's not done yet. You can have it at our other venue, but we don't allow live entertainment. And then the bride and groom's like, what do you mean? And so we've had to not back out on a job, but I've had to essentially piece together a different band for the couple to accommodate the space. They've done this to this particular company has done this to two of my clients, where they took their money and ran. Oops, the venue's not available. You have to use this backup venue, and it is not at all suitable for the situation. Sound is horrible. Decimal requirements are laughable. And, I guess that's all I say about that, because
Don't want a lawsuit.
I don't want a lawsuit, man. It was not a great situation. And more so, what makes me angry is that they did this to the client. And it messed up their vision.
Yeah.
Completely messed up their vision. But I will say, be cautious when putting money down on a venue that's not complete yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of scary.
I don't think I would do that.
Now, my sister did it. My sister did it when they were building Historic Acres in Hershey.
Mm-hmm.
The venue was not done. When she did eventually have the wedding, it was almost done. Like, it was very close. Like, some of the landscaping hadn't been done yet, but that was not big for them at all. But she took the chance to save a few bucks, and it worked out in her case. It doesn't always work out.
It's a crapshoot, man. It is a definite crapshoot.
And it's always a crapshoot. We never know what we're going to be walking into, especially when you're getting married on someone's property.
Yeah. Yeah, the amount of things that could potentially go wrong. Yeah. I'm not adverse to risk, but I also like to, not take chances where they're not necessary.
Right.
And for something like that, for the amount of money that couples invest in their wedding day, especially that, look, if they're hiring us, they got to have a big budget.
They got to have a big budget, and they've got to have access to appropriate power.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Is like when you're talking about having a budget that is including a live 10-piece band, or like if with our sister band Downtown Sound, a slightly smaller band or one of the remix bands, you still have a chunk of change you're paying for the band, on top of the food, the flowers, and photographers, and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of money that goes into these weddings, and
why risk?
Yeah, why risk it? Why people? If you got that much money, come on, give it to me just directly. I'll take it if you wanted to spend it.
Well, here's the thing too about these outdoor weddings. A lot of these outdoor weddings do require for you to rent a generator for the catering, for the band, for the DJ, whoever it might be. Make sure that you are going with a reputable company.
Woo-hoo.
We did have a wedding this past spring where the generator went out. The backup generator didn't work. And of course, people, the wedding planner looks at me like I can fix the situation. Like, turn on the music now. And I'm like, we don't have power. We don't have power. And so, what do you do? I can't turn music on. We don't have power. So making sure that the people you use are reputable and they're bringing in an appropriate amount of power. I've had people run things on a gas generator, like a gas power generator. So certainly take these things into consideration. Those are noisy.
Yeah, well, you can just get some squirrels and put them in a little running wheel, and hamster wheel.
One of the first weddings we ever did 8 years ago. Little did we know what we were walking into, but we were doing an outdoor wedding in Montoursville, which is towards State College. It was on a plot of land right on the Susquehanna River, and no joke, it was a circus tent. It was a circus tent.
Beautiful.
It was a white circus tent.
Okay.
It was a white circus tent, but there were like 600 guests. Things could have gone awry. Things did not go awry, so it was just fine. But they had so much food. The best catering company I've ever worked with, Hillside Catering, out of Montoursville, I believe. They're freaking amazing. But there was this whole raw bar. We always call it the shark wedding because there was a whole shark, a dead shark, as a centerpiece to this raw bar. They had like a stuffed bear. They had all these just crazy amount of stuff that a lot of things could have gone wrong, but it didn't.
Well, I mean, no risk, no reward. I mean, that's a big payoff, but man.
I think
hopefully the shark was dead. That would have been like really bad if that was
he was on ice. Well, I think what we're trying to express here is that take things into consideration of what could go wrong in a scenario. Yeah. If I decide to hire a string quartet for my ceremony and it's below a certain temperature, very likely they're not going to be able to play for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they will go out of tune very easily. Play, and it's contractually they won't do it. Yeah. But, it can be, you can run into issues.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I guess in any scenario, when you're planning something, you can always run into something. But I would say the outdoor ones are the most unpredictable with the weather. That's the scariest piece. I think you're the safest probably in the fall if you're going to do an outdoor wedding.
Yeah.
Which is why we're always so busy in the fall.
Or spring.
Yeah, or in spring, but spring showers.
Yeah, that's true. There's that. That's true. So, I mean, if you had to kind of make a rundown list of the things that people should be cognizant of before they book a venue. I mean, obviously, we've talked about like egress, parking, how easy is it going to be for
your guests,
and
for your vendors,
power.
Yeah, what does the power situation look like? If it's an old building, or if a lot of times we'll get an old converted church. What is if it hasn't been looked at carefully, you could be running into a lot of electrical issues, which might cause some issues with the sound. A lot of buzzing, maybe some buzzing going on because it's dirty.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of old buildings. Mm-hmm. So unless the power has been redone, or you kind of never know.
Yeah. We talked about briefly about sound ordinances.
Yes, sound ordinances. A lot of venues have a neighbor that is not very fond of hearing the music being played at weddings. Quite a few local venues I know have neighbors that are not fond of having loud music played. So that's a good question to ask them up front. Do you have a sound ordinance?
Yeah. Because, I mean, I think people lose sight of the amount of sound that comes out. I mean, we're not particularly we're not like Guns N' Roses. No. We other than our bass player, no one likes to carry like a whole lot of gear. But
we naturally give off a lot of noise anyway,
Yeah, I mean, I remember doing a wedding with a big band in New York at the Valencia.
Yes.
As a beautiful old ballroom, right? So it's actually acoustically, it's designed for performances like big bands, things like that. It's just from that era. But they started complaining that the band was too loud. It's like, this is a 15-piece big band.
Yeah.
Right? 5 trumpets, 5 trombones,
Yeah.
And it's not like we're trying to blow the walls down, but that's
just the sound you gave off.
That's the sound that you give off.
Yeah.
And so you can't expect to hire a 10-piece band and try to keep everything under 90 dB.
Yes. I do think that's another question for your venue is, do you have any decibel requirements. Some of them, to be quite honest, are made up by people that don't know a whole lot about music, because some of the decibel levels they give me is the level of a vacuum cleaner running, which is just not attainable.
Yeah.
Unless you're playing a boombox.
And even then, probably be too loud.
Yeah, and even then, it probably would be too loud. If you visit a venue and it is hard to hear in the venue because your voice reverberates so much, imagine that with 100 or 200 people and a band on top of it. Certainly going to be a loud scenario.
Very, very true.
And then everyone's going to be talking louder because they're fighting over each other.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It does become, there's not only the way that sound builds on itself just naturally. When we have one sound source, you add another sound source, and it's going to increase the volume. But then it becomes the battle of sound. So the louder the band is, the louder the people talk, and then the louder the band plays, and the louder people talk, and so it becomes this it's a snowball effect. Mm-hmm. So. We do a really great job, I think. Props to our production guy, Kevin, who has saved our butts many a time. Many a time.
He's like MacGyver.
Yeah, the aforementioned generator snafu.
Who saved the day? Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. He literally has MacGyvered so many things because we've had any number of issues. In Baltimore and DC, we always have issues with our wireless gear because of all the frequencies, and there's military and the airports are down there, and just so much. He always seems to figure it all out, though.
God love Kevin.
Oh, there was one at this one particular venue I was telling you about earlier that I'm not going to say the name of, but of course they had old power run through this building. As soon as the band started playing the horror, pop, breaker. So here comes Kevin with an extension cord, running like a bat out of hell, pulling power from another location, and got the band up and running within 30 seconds. He's a winner. I think I'll keep him.
Yeah, we'll keep you, Kevin.
The other big thing, as going in as a band, you should knowing you're going to have a band. What are the loadout requirements? We have been put in many a situation where you need a loadout in an hour. Is it possible? Yeah, it's possible. But are we staffed to do it? If you're coming to tell me that I have to load out in an hour the day of, then no, we're not staffed to do it. And my musicians are not crew members. And that's something that we should know. It'd be helpful to know far in advance so that we can make proper preparation. I know specifically Baltimore venues, a lot, if not all of them, require an hour loadout. So that is definitely something to ask.
Yeah, that's a big one. And I don't want to make it all about us, but it's all about us.
Mm-hmm. We're talking about entertainment.
Yeah. The other thing to consider, especially if you're having live entertainment, is storage / green room. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there have been venues that we've played at where, and they're beautiful venues, they're wonderful venues, outdoor venues and things like that, more than anything else, where we have limited space to store stuff, but on top of that, we have to, especially I'm thinking of one in particular that we did, where we're playing in the tent. The wedding ceremony is going on by the water, which is right, it's maybe 300 yards away from, or 100 yards or so from where we're at. So it's not like, it's like at a different location. But there's no place for us to change other than go to the porta potties.
Yeah.
and changing the porta potties. And, so we're there early to set up. It's a hot day, so everybody's like wearing shorts
Yeah.
and t-shirts and stuff like that. And then we've got to get dressed. You got to put on a tux jacket, got to put on your sequins gown. And you got to do it in like a
Oh,
little
yeah.
single stall thing.
Yeah.
Really tough.
It's really tough, especially when you're gross and sticky and not really ideal. We go in there and we have to do the whole load in piece. We obviously cannot load in dressed up. But when it's time to convert to the entertainer, it's really hard because you kind of feel gross.
Some people are gross all the time. It doesn't matter,
true.
And that's, I think that's also why, this is an aside. It has nothing to do with the venue, but I think that's why so many people who are from a musical or a theater background don't have a whole lot of issue with dropping pants in front of anybody.
Right.
Because you've been in these situations where you've got to change around other people. You have no choice because, you've got one room or you're outdoors, and you just got to, you kind of make yourself as inconspicuous as possible. It's not like you're standing on the stage doing that, although there's some people in the band that, they certainly would. But yeah, those are just like those little considerations that, while on the surface they may not seem to be that critical, they do have an impact.
They do have an impact. Day of. A lot of those pieces are definitely important things to bring up. And we're saying them now because they usually don't come to mind. They don't usually come to mind. And actually it took us this whole conversation to get them to come out of our own brains. But we've run into many a scenario that would have been great to know up front, and I think it would be very helpful in your planning process when booking a venue.
Yeah.
So
make a checklist.
Yeah,
I mean, I know it sounds kind of anal retentive, but it can go a long way to help make your special day as special as possible. Because the last thing anyone wants is if you're a bride or groom, you don't want to have your vendors having a meltdown.
Yes.
On the day of your event. You don't want your guests having a meltdown because there's not ample parking. Now, granted, you can't please everybody, but if you kind of, make your list and check it twice, then it's going to help to make your event run as smoothly as possible. Because if you're not prepared for it, then you're running the risk of having something that is unwanted to occur.
Yep. And those things are going to rear their ugly heads 2 weeks out. And you're going to be under the gun at that point to remedy these situations or make something work that you were not considering. And then possibly something could arise day of that, we're considering. And at that point, it's usually on the vendors to remedy whatever situation they can.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I'm always of the attitude that I want to make things as easy as possible for myself, but also for anyone else that is impacted by what I'm doing. And when it comes to, if you're thinking about hiring a band, especially like a large band like ours, like a 10-piece band, there are a lot of logistics that have to go into that. And if we're having a tough time, we do, and I tell you, we've been in some crappy situations, over the years, but we always manage to pull it off.
Yep.
But sometimes it prevents us from doing the absolute best job we can. We'll do a great job, but it may not be the absolute best because, if we've got to deal with power issues, whether it be dirty power where suddenly we're getting all these crazy hums or there's...
Or we're breaking, tripping breakers.
Tripping breakers, or, there are other things that start going on that affect our ability to perform at our highest level, then, it's doing a disservice to you. And so, if you're working with really good vendors, they're going to go the extra mile. But, if you do your due diligence on the front end, it just makes it that much easier for us to bring what we do at the highest level possible.
I agree wholeheartedly.
I knew you would.
Yeah. Without naming names, would there be any venues that you would prefer not to go back to?
Without naming names, yes.
I tell you, one of the scariest situations I was ever in at a venue is, and this was not, this was in Chicago. I did a private event at the top of the Willis Tower, which, Sears Tower. So I took the freight elevator to load in. That building's high. That sucker is high. The vendor elevator was doing one of these. Like you were rocking back and forth all the way down and all the way up the building. You could see out the cracks outside. It was pretty wild.
Yeah, it's pretty scary.
But it was a pretty fun experience.
It sounds like a great, in terms of the view and the vibe.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I've gotten to perform at some really amazing venues in big cities, in Chicago and in Dallas. At the top of the world, down the Mag Mile, some really awesome places.
Yeah.
But
it sometimes amazes me I guess because we already talked about how a lot of the places we play at are converted, so they're not particularly built as entertainment facilities. Because if you're a place for example, we just did the fundraiser for Ronald McDonald House at the Hershey Lodge. Great, because we're playing in this wonderful, huge room.
Specifically made for events.
Yeah, with a wonderful stage, and the loading dock goes right into the room.
Yeah.
So it's like you pull up to the door of the loading dock, you get your gear out, you walk through the loading dock, through the door, and you're in the venue. And it's
that's the epitome of what we love. We're like,
so that's because that's a place that is designed to host events.
Yes.
And so the layout is conducive to people bringing in and out large equipment.
Yeah. Specifically there too. They do a lot of conventions there.
Now, conversely, there are places that have loading docks where it's a very small loading dock. It's basically it's like the loading dock for example, it's like a loading dock for a retail clothing store.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like a small door that's just basically designed for you to be, kind of wheel your stuff in or carry a couple boxes in. It's not particularly set up for or it's set up for just loading large trucks. So the dock itself is not level with the surface. It's, 10 feet up, like for the back of a semi. So the semi can bring stuff in. But, if you're hauling a drum kit, you gotta lug it up. You gotta lug it up the steps.
Yeah.
So
lots of stuff to take into consideration.
Make it easy on us, people.
Make it easy. But places like the Convention Center in Hershey, that people don't choose places like that because they want the character of a room. And a lot of the places we play that tend to be harder rooms to play have the most character.
Yeah.
So we're always going to have challenges. We're always going to be, just being in business in general, we're always going to be having to do workarounds and trying to figure it out because that's what we do. We're the masters of figuring it out.
Yep.
But I think up front, it's like it's great for you to know these things.
Yeah. Well, and like I said earlier, if this is your first wedding, and hopefully, your first and last, that you just don't know until you know. The reason we know is because, we're doing these things twice a week, sometimes more.
Yeah.
Every week. So
I literally always walk in going, what kind of issues are we going to walk into today? Literally, every time I walk into something, what do we have to pivot with? How are we going to have to pivot? What are we going to have to change? What are we going to have trouble with? And I hate to say that I think that way, but I think it is also very helpful when we do need to pivot.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like you don't want to go in with a negative mindset,
Right.
but you also want to go in already in a problem-solving mode.
Realistically, knowing that you might.
Yeah, and I think sometimes that's what frustrates a lot of people from the perspective of the musician. A lot of musicians are spoiled, and they just expect everything to be exactly the way that they want it. The sound's going to be perfect, the stage is going to be perfect. We're going to have plenty of space. We're going to have it's going to be.
That's the big one, space.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We failed to mention that one.
But life is life, and when those golden gigs show up where everything is as you wish it would be, the stars align.
The stars align.
Those are fine, but
Yeah.
when you come in with you have to come in with an attitude that you are going to have to make some level of adjustment. So then that allows you to be in a responsive place as opposed to reactive.
Yes.
Because when we get reactive, that's when people start getting bitchy, and and then it's no good for
Nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that.
Nobody
We're
wants
gonna have a
that.
good time,
Yeah, I agree.
and make sure there's an open bar for the band too.
Oh, geez, I can't put that one on there. Oh, yeah. Or you just bring your bring your water.
Bring a water bottle.
All right. I think that's about it.
Okay.
I think that we've hit it.
Okay.
All right, folks. That concludes the follow up, and we're glad you tuned in. Hope you learned a little something. Got to hear us bitch a little bit.
A little bit, not too much. Yeah. And if you have any questions or comments, please let us know. I mean, because Katie's experience or years of doing this, she is a wealth of knowledge for not just what's going to work best for us as the entertainment, but what's going to help you to make your day the kind of day that you want it to be. So.
And I will say I'm not a wedding planner per se, but there's a lot of planning that we do along the way. So I do have a wealth of information. Should you have any questions, especially about hiring a live band at your venue.
Yeah.
So anyway, till next time.